right. Some more questions and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let me come right here.
Come at me.
All right. No. Let's go. Long journey. That's what I say.
Yeah.
So this is my question. Or this a couple years back. All right. So my first question. In John 18:38, Jesus is before Pilate, and he says, "What is truth?" Pilate asks Jesus, "What is truth?" Or some people would say, "Who is truth?" The world tells me that everything is relative, that there are so many religions and beliefs that claim to be speaking authoritatively on spirituality, and that these are all the results of people trying to form civilization, trying to form their culture, preserve their lives, stuff like that, and come with explanations for why the world is the way it is, and to get them through life. So a lot of just to get them through life. Like, this is what the world tells me about truth and religion. What as an Orthodox priest and somebody who lives this on a daily basis, what's your kind of view on that question that Pilate asked Jesus? So that's my first question.
Sure. And that question that Pilate asks Christ is an important point, because this is one of the differences between, I'm not an expert on all other religions in the world, but at least between Orthodox Christianity and most of the Western Christian groups, right? This is a big difference. In that for a lot of Western Christian groups, truth is sort of truths, right? There are things that are true. There's like statements, right? Like, this is a true statement. And so they'll talk about, like, well, there's objective truth. Like, here's a list of things that are sins, right? And that's true. And here's a list of things that are good, and right? Doctrines and right and all that. And these things are true. And they say, well, if we're talking about a Protestant group, they'll usually say, well, if you believe these things are true, right? If you believe this list of things are true, and different people have different lists, right? Yeah. Then, okay, you'll be saved, right? When you die, you'll go to heaven instead of going to hell, right? That's, the Orthodox Church approaches it very differently, because we say the truth is a person, right? That Christ is the truth. So coming to know the truth is not about, like, taking a true false test and I say you passed, because the answers you put were what I think the right answers are, right? Coming to know the truth is coming to know Christ more and more, because he's a person, he's risen, so he's still alive, right? And we do this through prayer and through worship. And the example I use to kind of explain this, right, is there's a difference between knowing God and knowing about God. Right? And because God's a person, right? You can compare it to knowing a person, right? So there are probably people who know more about my wife than I do. In the sense that, like, I don't know her exact, I could guesstimate her height, but I don't know her exact height. I don't know her weight, right? Exact weight. I don't know, she was alive for a long time before I met her, right? So members of her family and longtime friends, right? Know all kinds of facts, I don't know the name of all her school teachers, right? I don't know the name, right? Right. So there's things about my wife that I don't know. And there may be people out there who know more about my wife in that sense. But because she's my wife and we're married and we've been married for more than a decade now, right? I know my wife in a way that they don't, because she's a person, right?
Not just a list of
yeah. And so it's not like physics or science, right? Where you go and you get knowing more about a star or a galaxy or a planet or a moon, right? It's just assembling more facts, right? But you can assemble all the facts in the world about a person. That's not the same as knowing the person. And so that's where we try to put the emphasis,
Okay.
right, is on. And I tell people, I always say when I'm talking to people who are thinking about joining the Orthodox Church, there's only one reason to join the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
And if you're joining the Orthodox Church for any other reason, you shouldn't yet.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And that's the reason to join the Orthodox Church, is that this is the place where you've encountered Christ.
Okay.
And this is the place where you believe you can come to know him more deeply. And if that's true, then you should join the Orthodox Church,
Okay.
right? If it's for some other reason, if it's some, you're mad at your old church about something, or you just think, oh, well, the Orthodox Church is kind of morally conservative and I like that, or whatever it is, those are bad reasons.
Okay.
Right? That's not why.
And that actually goes into my next question.
Okay.
That you ended right there. Still Jesus before Pilate, but this is John 18:37, and he tells Pilate, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And Jesus says that those, who hear his voice are of the truth. So you talk about Jesus, different people say different things about Jesus. That,
right.
My background, different people said different things about Jesus and what Jesus was trying to do. So who is Jesus, and why can we trust that he is speaking the truth? And I have a follow-up to that.
Okay.
I guess that kind of relates to who is God and what is God.
Yeah, well, yeah, because Jesus is God. Yeah, well, that's the core. That's why what he has to say is true. Because number one, he's, right, our creator, right?
Okay.
And so that gives him authority. But also, a lot of that authority comes from his love for us. Right, being willing to die for us, not when we were doing great things.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, okay, well, you're this hero, right? So I'll die to save your life because you've got to go cure cancer, or you've got to go, do something big, keep doing these amazing things. Yeah. It was when we were a mess and we'd fallen down and we were broken and screwed. That's when he came and loved us and died for us. Okay. And so that gives him the authority to speak. Right? And me talking is not Jesus talking. Okay. Right? Yeah. We do what we do in the church, and when I'm preaching a homily or a sermon, right, I'm asking Christ to use that to speak to the people who are hearing it. Okay. Right? Okay. I'm not asking him to put words in my mouth or use me as a ventriloquist dummy or something, right? Okay. But that's something I say, right? I've a lot of times had people come to me and be like, "Wow, that was really good. It really struck me when you said this," and they say something that like I had not thought of, that like I was not intending to say. Okay. But it was what they needed to hear that morning. Okay. And when that happens, that proves for sure that it wasn't me. Right? It wasn't that I'm just really skilled and, I knew the right thing to say to this person. That, that despite me, Christ was talking to him. It's sort of like a lot of times it's like Balaam and his donkey. God can talk through if he needs to.
If he needs to.
Yeah, if he needs to get a message to you, he can do it. Okay. But yeah, so that's in the Orthodox Church, there's no human who's like infallible. Okay. Right? We don't have like a pope who's infallible to say this and that. We don't have, Protestant groups don't have a pope, but a lot of times they'll have somebody who they say, well, this person's a prophet, this person's this leader, and sort of what they say goes. Right? They may not say they're infallible, but they say, oh, because of this gift God has given them, right? Yeah. And that's never how it works. Okay. Right? In the Orthodox Church. Christ, all the authority is Christ's. Okay. He doesn't give it to other people. Right? He doesn't, right? But he uses us, right, as an instrument, as a tool to do what he wants to do. Okay. And when we say this over and over again in the liturgy, you've probably heard it over and over again, where we offer ourselves and our whole life right, to Christ.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing when we're offering it. We're saying, here, use me as the tool to do what you want to do. And when we do that, that changes us, right? When Christ loves someone through me, that changes me too.
Okay.
And transforms me. So, I sometimes say, and it's a little bit of a simplification, to be fair, right? But I've said it a lot in public, and nobody's really come after me about it. So there's some truth to it, I think. That when you look at how different Christian groups look at Christ ascending into heaven, right? Christ ascends into heaven, and then there's this period of time before he returns that we're living in, right? And when you look at how they view it, most Protestant groups, it's sort of Christ ascends into heaven and he leaves the Bible. Right? And so this is our guidebook. This is where we go, right? And that causes its own issues in terms of then who gets to interpret it? And, how do you know who's right and all that?
Yeah.
But in the Roman Catholic Church, they say, well, Christ ascended into heaven and he left St. Peter, right? And then the Pope, he left somebody in charge, right?
Yeah.
That's he gave his authority entrusted his authority to that person until he comes back.
Yeah.
In the Orthodox Church, we believe that, Christ bodily ascended into heaven, but he's still with us. That's why in every liturgy we say Christ is in our midst. Right? That he's still with us. And so he still has all of that authority. And he's the one who still exercises it through this. So I'm not infallible, the bishop's not infallible, the metropolitan's not infallible, the patriarch's not infallible. Right?
Okay.
Christ is infallible.
Okay. I'm following.
Right? And we pray and hope that he'll speak and work and act through us.
Okay. So that leads it. Well, we're gonna what you said led into another
question.
Okay. But I'm gonna pause right there. And I'm gonna go to this other question because I think it connects to who is Jesus. I was reading a book by Michael Heiser.
Okay.
He wrote a book called "What Does God Want?"
Yeah.
Okay. And from an Orthodox perspective, what does God really want for us? Why does he want?
Yeah.
It?
Yeah.
So,
I'm familiar with Heiser still. So
I know.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And so I won't say too much in reference to him. I'm not going to talk about where I disagree. It'll be obvious where we disagree, right? If you read both, right? Rather than just responding to what he says. So, God created us in the first place. This is going to be a place where we largely agree. God created us in the first place because humans, because he wanted to share his life with us. Right? And that was an act of love because he didn't need us. Right? He doesn't need humans. It's not like he was lonely. Yeah. Right? Because there's the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So there wasn't lonely anyway. Right? That's who eternally existed. Right? Yeah. So, but out of love, right? He created us and created the universe, right? As the place where he could express that love to us and share his life with us. And what happened in the Garden of Eden and then subsequent things is that devil, demons, right, rebellious spiritual powers who were envious of humanity because of that, sort of lured humanity into joining them in their rebellion.
Why would they be envious of that if they also were sharing in that life before?
Right, because they don't in the same way.
Oh, okay.
Because one of those persons, God the Son, was going to become human and not become an angel.
Okay,
yeah. And so there's that jealousy, right? And if you're angry at God and you're created by God, there's not a lot you can do to God. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's not a fight you're going to win.
But there's a lot you can do.
Right. But you can go and attack things that he loves.
Okay.
Right? You can go and attack his creation that he loves and try and destroy that. And so lured us into joining them in their rebellion against God and into sin. Right? And for the Orthodox Church, sin is not like breaking rules. Right? It's not like God made a bunch of rules and we break them and he gets angry. You know? It's sin is like destructive. Right? It's self-destructive. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you get caught. Right? Like if you go and you steal, it doesn't matter if nobody else ever knows about it. Right? You're a thief and you'll always know about it. Right? And that's changed who you are. Yeah. You know? And so sin and wickedness, they change. Right? They change us. The best metaphor I think I've had, unfortunately recently, because it's become so prevalent, is like drug addiction. Okay. Right? It starts out, doesn't seem so terrible, right? I mean, you're not hurting anybody, right, at first and everything. But then as you get into a cycle of addiction, it changes you. Yeah. And you start doing stuff you never would have done, you know, before it all started. Yeah. You know, that you never would have thought it. And eventually you end up in this place where you're like, how did I get here? You know, how did things end up this way? And it doesn't look like there's any way out. Yeah. And all sin is that way. Right? That it starts out, it seems kind of harmless. Right? And then
it's a downward cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. The cycle
really destroys the person.
Right. And so God, out of his love for us, both wants to defeat his enemies who aren't us. Okay. They're those spiritual beings who are trying to destroy us, right? Okay. They're the same enemies we have, right? So if they attacked him by trying to destroy us, how is he going to defeat them? By saving us, right? But he's not saving us from himself, right? Like he's mad at us and like, oh man, I got this problem. I'm like super mad at them because they broke the rules, but I don't want to kill them. So that's not the issue, right? He's saving us from ourselves, right? We're destroying ourselves real well, right? Like he doesn't need to come in and punish us. We're already messing things up and messing the world up and hurting each other, and right. So he comes to save us from ourselves. And set us free from that. You know, when we're down at the end of that road and we're like, how did I get here and how can I get back? That's when, right, he comes and saves us. Okay. Right? Christ comes and meets us where we are. He becomes like us. And when he becomes human, you know, he's not like the emperor's son or King Herod's son, right? He's like homeless. He's got people while he's alive questioning whether he's legitimate, right? Because Joseph wasn't his father. Yeah. You know, and traveling from place to place, you know, just depending on people to feed him. And then he ends up getting executed by the Roman government, you know, in the most painful way possible. You know, and the people who he came to save all rejected him. Yeah. You know, but out of that, right, he defeats death. He defeats those spiritual powers who are against us. Right? And so what God wants isn't so much something he wants from us as something he wants for us. Right? He still wants to share his life with us. Right? He still doesn't want us to die. Right? The Old Testament says that over and over again. Right? God wills that none should die. No man should perish, right? But he should turn and live, right? And so that's what he wants. He wants us to return to him. And the way that works in the Orthodox understanding is sort of what I was just talking about. That God is at work in the world all the time, continuously, right? To make things good again, to transform them, right? He's working everywhere all the time. Okay. And when we cooperate with that, when we work with him, right, and we help him do that, right, When we show his love to people, when we go and we make peace where there's conflict, when we help heal people, when we help do these things and cooperate with them, that changes us too in the process. And if you've ever been part of any kind of ministry like that, you know that, right? You know that you go to bring food to somebody who needs food. You know how that changes you too, doing it. So yeah, that's our understanding, and that's our understanding of how salvation works. Mm-hmm. That it's not about, well, I say on the true false test, this is true and this is false, and I get the right answers. Mm-hmm. And so that makes me a Christian. Yeah. And it's not about just, do I go to heaven or hell when I die, but it's about who I am. Oh, the mice is back. It's about weather change coming inside. It's about who I am and who God created me to be. Yeah. And becoming that.
Yeah. So going on that, because who was Jesus? Why we can trust him, and then what does God want from us? We learn all of that in a book. It's called the Bible. And I remember going to college, and I had certain professors. I took a couple religious classes and all of that, and they really questioned that. And growing up in the community I'm from, African American community, we had a lot of people that was, into Egyptology, Kemet type stuff, and all that stuff, and they would question the Bible, and and the Bible is a special book for Orthodox Christians. What is the Bible? Why is it important? Why can we trust it? And when it speaks about the way things really are authoritatively, what makes it so special in this world? I mean, I know it's a big question, but we probably could summarize it in things like that.
Yeah. Well, the our view of the Bible is a little different, right? Than most, especially Protestant type American churches, because the Bible doesn't, for us, and this is just historically true, the Bible doesn't sort of sit there on its own by itself, right? Like it didn't fall out of the sky, somebody didn't find it. And I'm not just being funny there. I mean, like you look at like the Quran in Islam.
Yeah, I was going to make that.
Right, that was like dictated, right, all at once, right? Here it is,
on the tablets in heaven.
Yeah. So, not like that, right? For us, it comes. The Bible comes into being over the course of literally, like, between 1,200 and 1,500 years. Okay. Right, and people who were writing it didn't necessarily know at the time, hey, I'm writing Bible, right? And they didn't sometimes Christians talk like this, though. They talk like, or they'll talk like, St. Paul went into a trance. Okay. And then what's it? Oh, it's the book of Romans,
God possessed him.
Yeah, just wrote it. Yeah. Or like an angel came and whispered in his ear and wrote down what he said. Now, if you read the book of Revelation, St. John had a vision and he wrote it down, and an angel does tell him hey, write this down. Yeah. So that does happen sometimes. Okay. But that's not most of the Bible. That's not right. Overall. Okay. Yeah. I mean, when St. Paul's writing a letter to a church, it's just, I planted this church. Now I'm somewhere else, and I hear there's this stuff going on, and I need to send them a letter and say, hey, guys, remember these things, and here's what you need to do,
Something more relatable.
Yeah. So there's real humans and, real communities and real things going on. And even in the Old Testament, right, it's the people of Israel recording their history, and the things that happened to them and their experiences. And we get the Bible, again, it's not all by itself. We get it in this context, right? So in the case of the Old Testament, you've got ancient Israel, and then Judea, right? So there's these communities, and these people who this is their history and their, wisdom, and the Psalms are their hymns that they sing when they worship their God, and so there's this community. The same thing with the New Testament. Right, there are churches, there's Christians, right, getting together to worship, And this is sort of emerging from that. And then those individual books, right, circulate around in churches.
Yeah.
Right? And churches start collecting them together.
Yeah.
Right? And the Bible sort of forms over time that way inside this community.
Yeah.
And that community is reading it and preaching it and thinking about it and applying it to different situations going on. And sometimes with different things going on, it reads different ways,
Yeah.
and seems to apply in different ways. So if you part of the struggle, especially if you're talking about like Western higher education,
Okay.
right, with the Bible, is that they're looking at the Bible pulled out of all that context,
Okay.
right? To give you an example that's not the Bible, right? We talk about Greek mythology,
Yeah.
right? And so, you go watch Clash of the Titans or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
For us, like, Greek mythology is like the Justice League or something, right? It's like superheroes.
Yeah.
Guys running around like that. That's not how ancient Greek people experienced their religion.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was a whole other thing to them.
Yeah.
Right? But we've sort of just pulled these stories and these things out of that context. And now we're just looking at them here in the modern world of stories. And we can pick them apart and this and that and the other. But we don't always know what was really going on and what the story really meant to people.
Yeah.
Right, at the time.
Okay.
And so that happens too with the Bible when you pull it out of that context of that community.
Okay.
Right? When a psalm is just like, well, let's dissect this. Right? You're going to dissect something, you got to kill it first. Right? And so it's not alive anymore, right? And, a psalm is a poem. That poem, the person who wrote it, it meant something, and people have been singing that for hundreds of years, and it meant something. And what it meant to somebody singing it, in one century in one place, and another century another place, might be very different, but it's still resonated with them.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not going to get that in a university classroom, like picking apart the poetry.
Okay.
Like the meter and stuff.
And on to that, like, so people, like, you brought up the Psalms and or the Proverbs,
Yeah.
wisdom literature. Like, a lot of people, like, talking about going back to what makes the Bible special.
Yeah.
Like, they would say, well, you could find these kind of proverbs and these kind of wisdom sayings and this kind of stuff in another book that was in Kemet or somewhere that was a part of Egypt. Or they'll say things like, Bible is good for, like, morality and education, and, like, making you a better person. But what just makes it like a special book? What's so special about it that you should really take what it's saying seriously,
right,
as a salvation type of guide to it,
Yeah. Well, it's not primarily recording those things for their own sake, right? Because you're right. Yeah, you can find problems. I used to, when I was going through, I don't know if you listened to any of my Bible studies online, but when I was going through Proverbs, at the beginning of each class, we'd play a game called Ben Franklin, Shakespeare, or Proverbs, where I'd write a quote from Shakespeare, I'd write a quote from Ben Franklin, I'd write a quote from Proverbs, and people try to guess which was which. Okay. And sometimes it was hard. Okay. Right? So, yeah, you can find, you can find other people, saying wise things. Yeah. And the Christian churches always acknowledge that. In fact, you find, especially very early Christian authors like St. Justin Martyr talks about, like, there are these seeds of the truth out there, right, in the world, and that God wants those to be there, because that way when Christ, who's the fullness of the truth, comes to them, they'll recognize him, because they already have these seeds. The beginning. Okay. So we don't consider that a problem, right? Like, that's a good thing. But the core of what is recorded in the scriptures is the experience of God over this period of 1,200, 1,1500 years. Okay. Right? And for us as Orthodox Christians, right? We could all have religious experiences.
Yeah.
Right? And we pray and we have spiritual experiences, relationship, but it's very easy to be deceived, right? It's very easy to misinterpret things, right? Or read too much into something, right? Yes. And so we have like, okay, well, here's how the people who knew Christ 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, 2,500 years ago, here's how they experienced it.
Okay.
Here's the person who they came to know.
Okay.
Right? And so then that gives me a guide in my own experience. Right? To say, this is why the Orthodox Church, we talk so much about the church fathers and stuff. Because we don't stop like in the New Testament. We say, well, hey, here's how they knew Christ in the 3rd century, in the 6th century, in the 9th century. Right? Because if Christ is God, right, then he's the same. As Hebrews says, he's the same yesterday, today, forever. Right? So he's not going to change, right? So if I have some experience and it sort of doesn't match up, right, with the way, Christ has been experienced for generations and generations and generations by my fathers and forefathers, then
probably problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, then I need to reinterpret my experience.
Okay.
Right? So there's a stability. So for us, the scriptures are sort of the central part of tradition, but they're not the whole thing.
Okay.
Right? That continues after it, right? And before it. And so that applies even to just interpretations of the scriptures. Right? Anybody can pick up a Bible in English and say, well, I think this means that, and I think that means that. You can sit there on YouTube and hear complete opposite things about the same verse.
Yeah.
But that continuity, right? If Christ is the same, right, and I come up with some idea of, hey, this passage is really saying this, but that's not how every holy person, every righteous person, right, going back thousands of years has understood it. I'm probably wrong. It's a humility thing,
That's when you come to the humility.
Yeah, I'm not the one who finally figured it out after all these centuries. I got the key. But yeah.
So the Bible is a part of the tradition,
right? And tradition for us is just the life of the church through the centuries, which includes the scriptures, and the scriptures are central to that. Right, but there's the whole life that we share together. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that. I'm gonna segue to my next question, which is a question that's important to me because, again, my background and my experience with religion,
sure,
and what I kind of was struggling with maybe high school, college, more of is the idea that Christianity is a slave religion for African Americans. That's how we feel about it. A lot of us, we feel like it is a slave religion. It's a religion that's really not for copper-colored black people, whatever you want to say. It's not really a religion. But in my mind now, I'm thinking of like Ethiopian Orthodoxy. I'm thinking about those things. But it's really a situation where I feel like, there is I think we represent, or we see, when we see Christianity, we see something that was like a tool that was used by maybe Martin Luther King, maybe it was used by other people. Martin Luther King is the one.
A lot of the abolition movement came out of churches. Yeah,
somebody like that, Frederick Douglass, type of dude who said, he liked Christianity, but he didn't like the slave, he called it the slave type of Christianity, so I feel like, it is Christian. I'm just going to ask you straight up, is Christianity, I don't believe this no more.
Right.
But is Christianity, or I never
How do I respond to that idea?
Is Christianity a slave religion? And mixed in with that is, for me, is it the white man's religion or something? Because that was what was being taught and to us around the people that I was with in my community was like, look, you can't go there because look at all of these, listing all of these atrocities. And Western Christianity, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, this is the fruit of their labor. So why would you want to? I mean, yeah, they have good things in it, but why would you want to join with something like that? You know, and poison yourself and all that. So
yeah,
I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Protestantism is white Northern European religion. I mean, that's where it came from.
Okay.
Right. I mean, Germany, Scandinavia, Britain. Right. I mean, that's where it's from. You know.
Right.
And most of Southern Europe stayed Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Right. Northern Europe went Protestant. You already mentioned. Yeah. Right, the Orthodox Church is Ethiopia being the obvious example, but I don't know if you're on Facebook. If you're not, congratulations. Don't start.
I am.
Okay, but I am. But I'm friends with a ton of people in Uganda. The Orthodox Church in Uganda is growing like crazy, and Kenya also.
Yeah, I've seen the documentary.
I think. I'm going to be triumphant. I think, especially in the U.S., with some notable exceptions, we've fallen down on the job as Orthodox Christians in terms of reaching out to African Americans. I say some notable exceptions because I have some friends, like my friend Father Paul Abernathy, who I went to seminary with, whose dad is African American and his mom is Syrian. Yeah.
Interesting mix.
And he went, as soon as he graduated from seminary, he moved to the Hill District in Pittsburgh. And set up a mission. St. Moses the Ethiopian mission there. And not a mission primarily in terms of a church. Like, he set up a mission like, we're going to feed people, we're going to teach people literacy, we're going to do this stuff. And then they had a chapel.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, we're going to go pray at this chapel at these times. You don't have to come. You're welcome to come. Yeah. While you're here with these other services and stuff, but and that's really good. So there are people who are doing that. We need to do more of it for precisely the reason you're talking about, because we don't have a fair amount of that history. Now, in terms of Christianity in general, right? Christianity is the only religion in world history to abolish slavery. Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting things when you go back. That starts all the way back when Christianity first became a legal religion. We have 2 years in a row where St. Gregory of Nyssa, in the 4th century, so this is right after Constantine, right? This is becoming the official religion. His Pascha sermon, so for Easter, right, biggest Sunday of the year when he had the most people, he's telling everybody slavery is incompatible with Christianity.
Yeah, I read a quote.
Yeah, he's like, you can't claim to own another human being who Christ died for, and you can't stand here on Pascha, and say that, right?
Okay.
So that's as early as you can get. And there's stories later on with the Byzantine Empire where they're interacting with like the Turks and stuff, where the Turks thought they were insane to not have slavery because they said it was just a fact of life, like this is just how the world is. Unfortunately, a lot of Roman Catholicism and Protestantism went the other way in the medieval period, and it was always a lot. It was never all, but that's the reality. I mean, you can't deny that reality. I will say the first people to actually, in terms of Western Christians, who really started pushing for the abolition of slavery, like in the 18th century, were mostly Quakers. There were a few people. There were people all the way along, like Bartolomeo de las Casas. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a rough contemporary of Christopher Columbus, but he spent his whole life fighting for Native American rights and to end slavery in the Spanish colonies. So there were people all along the way who were faithful Christians and looked at it and said, "Hey, like this doesn't work."
thing, like, and this is the way because I was watching a documentary about, I think it was either Kenya or Uganda, and how because on one hand you had the Pope saying that the pagans, the Sassarenes, and all the people that basically was non-Christian, because they was non-Christian, they could be enslaved.
Yeah.
And so he could do that. But when I looked at how Uganda and Kenya received Orthodoxy, and they didn't say, oh well, you know, because you're not a Christian, or because you're from another sect of Christianity, we have the right to enslave you and teach your children and make you become.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like a lot, and maybe this is kind of how we view that, and then also, and when we go after this, like the Bible that early maybe African Americans in America, maybe even in Europe received, was kind of in certain parts, other parts they had different things, but it was like a slave Bible that would kind of was more of, you know, don't teach you not to rebel, and you know, I know there's some verses in the Bible, and I don't want to get into that today,
right.
But there are some verses in the Bible that, you know,
right.
They're
against rebellion against authority in general.
Yeah, so they used,
but they were used.
They was using it to say, well, you know, you don't talk back to the, you know,
to enforce this corrupt institution.
So and so that was kind of what those things is the kind of things we receive, and like for me, I'm gonna get to my history and all that later. But for me, it's more like, you know, I don't want to have to sanitize the past.
Yeah, no.
To be comfortable with, you know, where I'm at in my journey, my spiritual journey or whatever. I don't want to have to, like, I just want to be 100 with it and just say this is what it was, and things like that.
There's a lot of evil.
Yeah.
That happened. Yeah. And the people who were doing it, in a lot of cases, claimed to be Christians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made it worse.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand, you know, when you know everybody's sinner at the end of the day, and then we have sin, but it's just that it was Christianity that
it happened.
It happened with Christians
here, and if it was another country, it might be somebody else.
Yeah,
you know, another country, it might be Islam, or it might be, you know, Hindus of a different caste, or it could be, you know what I mean, like but here it was
Christian. So let me go on to the. I think we kind of already touched on the sects in Christianity. Well, I don't know why are there so many, and we kind of did touch on it, but why are there so many like sects in Christianity, and why doesn't God do something about it?
Well, part of it is the reason why I think part of the reason you were talking about why Orthodox Christianity is a little different than some of those others. Yeah. In that, based on the example of Christ, right, we don't approach things from the perspective of power and control, and we're going to make you do the right thing, or the thing we think is right. Okay. Right? We're going to come and we're going to enforce this. Even St. Gregory of Nyssa wasn't there like campaign to the emperor, you need to abolish slavery. He was telling Christians who were expecting him to give them communion, like, I can't do this if you don't, you know, you need to change your heart, right? And get this right, you know, for there to be real change. And I think you see that in American history, frankly. Because people every once in a while somebody used to make a joke, right? Somebody would say violence never solved anything, right? And then somebody would say, well, you know, slavery. Yeah. Right? Like the Civil War.
Which is true.
And it's like, well, it's sort of true. Yeah. It's sort of true. Because it's not like 1865, the North won the war and things were all better. Right? Things were still real bad, right? Yeah. And I think, frankly, like Martin Luther King Jr. laying down his life did more to change people's hearts than the Northern Army winning a war. Right? And that I think that's why Dr. King believed in sort of non-resistance, right? And peaceful civil disobedience, right? That would be the way. And that's the way early Christians did it. That's how the Roman Empire became Christian, was Christians letting themselves be killed. And suffering and dying. Being willing to give up their life rather than take a life, you know. And I think we get that from Christ. We get that from God. That God doesn't come in and exert force. Right? God wants these things for us. Wants to save us from ourselves and the road we're on. But he's not going to come in and force us. He's not going to make us love him.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's not love. It's something else.
Coercion.
Yeah, it's something else.
Coercion.
It's slavery. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the answer to that last part, why God doesn't do anything about it. But a lot of it is history, right? I mean, the Church of Rome split from the other historic churches that are now the Orthodox Church because the Pope was claiming sort of supremacy. You know, he was claiming power over the whole church, and the rest of the church was like, no. You know? Yeah. And so it split. And then the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century is really those chickens coming home to roost, right? Of him trying to enforce his power then over Western Europe, and that eventually breaking and people rebelling against it, right? But the problem was, when you have a structure for 500 years, it's all based on authority from the top down, right? And he's keeping everyone in line, like through violence, like the Inquisition, right? I mean, like enforcing this order, right? And then people break free from that. They don't sort of form a new order.
Yeah, they want to be completely free from any of that.
And so,
they experience.
And so Protestantism sort of goes in all directions, you know, from there. Sort of the pendulum swings in the other direction, you know, from this kind of tyranny to like anarchy, you know. And so, that's sort of how you end up with all these groups, you know. And while there may be some Roman Catholic folks who'd like to be able to force everybody to come back into the Roman Catholic Church, but I mean, the Orthodox Church doesn't want to do that, right?
One Roman Catholic told me, you know, I was asking him about slavery, and he was like, "What's wrong with conquering and pillaging? And what's wrong with conquering and doing?" He was like,
"Correct response to that is what's wrong with Jesus."
That's basically what he told me. I was talking about slavery, but I do agree. I do see your perspective. I mean, it's like, well, God doesn't coerce. God, you know, he allows even in my own life, you know, there's nothing that coerced me to love him or not love him, or to want to do better in my spiritual life or not. It was more of like, you know, him trying to woo you, draw you, and your response to that drawing, your response to that in your life. So I can see why that in a way it is him doing something about it. By letting you descend or ascend toward it. So okay.
Like in Romans, you know, this is all day long I've held out my hands to an obstinate, stubborn people. Hold his hands at waiting, you know. So that's the approach we take. That's why we, you know, you probably noticed, right? I eventually came and talked to you because it was getting silly, but I'm not like going around trying to pressure people into joining the Orthodox Church. Like I'm going to go, you know, steal all the people from the Presbyterians, right?
I've seen that before.
Like I'm not about that, but we're always here, right? And I present what we have, right? And like I said, if this is the place where you find Christ, then come be a part of us. But I'm not interested in giving a sales pitch or, you know,
I appreciate that. I think I came here like 2018 actually, when I went back on my phone, because I recorded like walking in and everything the first time I came here. It was actually like 2018. And the reason I did that is because I said I wanted to experience the things I was reading about after, you know, a long journey. So I came in here and I experienced, and from the moment I walked in, I loved it. I was like, this is so different from Southern boy from Lake Charles, Louisiana, you know, who grew up in Seventh-day Adventist or in a Protestant worldview, and kind of like, this is different. But I feel like I'm at home here for some reason. I feel like this is where, like, I literally lived 3 minutes from here.
Okay.
Like I didn't know that. I didn't know this existed. Like,
Yeah.
But I literally lived 3 or 4 minutes from here, in like my senior year of college, which was the first time I came here. It was called Bridgeway Apartments. It's literally like right around the corner from me.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, there's one right next to me. I'm like, go in. That's when it all started. Yeah. But before 20, I had no idea what Orthodoxy was. I had no idea what it was at all. So for me, it was a search. It started in college and ended me here. But I definitely felt like, I think Father Barnabas Pa, I don't know if you know him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
He talked about like how when he was in his search, he wanted to Christianize his whole life, or you know, like just his whole life be spiritually connected. And I kind of felt like, you know, I had got to that point where I was like, I wanted to like not just become a better person, but if God exists and he's real, and there is something beyond the suffering and the pain. You know, I just went through 2 hurricanes, so yeah. You know, I kind of understand it's the deaths and all that, but there is this reality, and it's a true reality of like overcoming sin, death, and having this life with God, this love relationship with God. I felt that here, even though, you know, I was in and out, but I was experiencing. I just came here like I didn't want to judge anything. I just wanted to sit back and experience like for as long as I could, you know, just to have that experience of like, you know, like you said in the liturgy, Christ is in your midst. In our midst, he is and ever shall be. So he is, and that's kind of how I felt. Like when you leave that place, that sacred space, you go out into the world and take whatever you receive there with you. That peace, that relationship with God, and I take the body and blood of Christ and all that, and you receive Christ, and you allow the energy, the operations, the activity, whatever you want to call it, you allow Christ to work in you. So when you go out there, and when I was working with juveniles, that was a prayer. There was a prayer I would pray that you probably know very well. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, as I was working with the juvenile, because at the time I wasn't living the best life, but I was like, I knew. And I added some stuff from other stuff from St. Athanasius, but I knew like, don't let what I do or my mistakes or my, you know, where I'm at just right now in my heart, like stop me from being able to serve these young people that I'm around. And I kind of felt like I got a lot of that, because that was at the time I was going to Orthodoxy. I got a lot of that ability or that peace just by coming to the liturgy and just being able to experience that and being able to learn that, hear that, and repeat that prayer and stuff like that. So I definitely feel like it was a healing for somebody who had the veil kind of over his eye and was looking for that rest and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I feel. I don't know if you want to say something to that, because I got just like 2 more questions.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say the reason I finally came and talked to you today was number one was getting kind of silly because of how long you've been here. Yeah. But also it was getting to the point where it's like I was starting to feel bad. Like I hope he doesn't feel like he's not welcome, or like I don't want, you know, because I do. Okay. But it's like I said, I never want to push anybody, you know, or pressure anybody about it. Yeah.
So that's where I was at from the first moment, like I said. And the first moment I walked in here, y'all was doing a baptizing baby. Yeah. Yeah, so I was like, oh my God. I was like, Grandma, see this.
It's different. Yeah.
But I loved it all, you know, everything. So I'm gonna ask my other question real quick. And I want true spirituality, but the world says spirituality is false. That materialistic Western mind that kind of dominates things. Yeah. Does Orthodoxy have true spirituality, or why do you think it does? Yeah. And what is its response to the world that rejects spirituality as a legitimate category of existence?
Yeah. Well, I think it wasn't consciously done. Mm-hmm. There was sort of a bargain made in Western culture around the time of, you know, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, where double down with the materialist worldview on like science and technology and these and have incredible advances, right? And those aren't a bad thing necessarily, depending on how they're used, but they're not necessarily a bad thing. It's incredible advances. But the bargain was that a lot of the ancient wisdom and spiritual wisdom, moral wisdom, right, was lost because all the focus was put over on this other side. So we're sort of way ahead of the game. Like if you compare a person today to a person in the time of Christ, right? Technology, we've got them licked, like all over the place, right? But in terms of living a good life, not morally good, like doing it, but a good life, right? Navigating life on this earth, right? I think we're way behind.
Okay.
I think we're way behind. I think you can see that all kinds of places, right? Like how hard it is for us to sit in a room for 5 minutes by ourselves without getting out a phone or something, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you realize like they didn't have any of that, so they would often sit with their thoughts, and that was okay. They didn't go crazy like we do, you know, right? Like, and they knew themselves, and they knew each other, and they knew their families. You know what I mean? There was there was a wisdom there.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you're a materialist and you don't want to believe in God, angels, demons, whatever, right? We'll just talk that level of wisdom that's been lost, right? Now, I, of course, would go beyond that, right? That there's not only what we call the visible world, there's also the invisible world, or the material world, and the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And you can't, even science sort of butts up against this. Like when you go to like neuroscientists and stuff, when it comes to like human consciousness, you know, all of a sudden they start sounding like Buddhists or something, you know?
Yeah, I did watch one of those.
Yeah.
Consciousness. And it's like, you're not a materialist anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, so, you know, it's very hard to really be a materialist.
Like to live it?
Right. Yeah. And take any of these things serious. Like you have to just cut off a whole bunch of like, I'm just not going to think about right, any of these things, and I'm just going to, or sort of import things that you take for granted, like from Christianity, even though you have no real materialist basis for them, you know, but just like, you know, like it's good to be humble. Why? It just is, right? You know, if you're a materialist, you know. So I think the advantage Orthodoxy has is that we're living in America too. We're living in the West too, right? We grew up here too. But I think we have an easier path to get back to a lot of that wisdom, because of our understanding of tradition, right? That living community and that living tradition. We have a more live connection to it than I think any other Christian group. I mean, even the Roman Catholic Church has modernized so much. You know, you go to the average Roman Catholic Church now, it's doing like the Novus Ordo Mass and stuff. And it's hard to tell it from a Protestant church. You know, the music, everything, right? Yeah. And so, again, there's, you know, in some way, it's technically better, right? The music is technically better, right? The lighting is definitely technically better, right? But that more of that connection has been lost. And so I think that rootedness is what gives us a better path, right? To getting back to spirituality. There's, and we have, especially in our monastic tradition, if you ever get a chance to visit like an Orthodox monastery, like you'll find people who are still living out that kind of life now, you know, where they could sit for an hour and pray, you know, and, you know, which I can't do, right? You know, but to see that is still possible and the resources are here to do it, insofar as we're willing to invest ourselves in it and pursue it. Right, because we have, I don't live in a monastery, right? So I have all the temptations and distractions and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy for me to not want to work at spending time in contemplative prayer or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? It's much easier for me to go watch a rerun or binge something, or play Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Right? Those are all real simple,
Yeah.
and easy and attractive, or get on Facebook and scroll and look at nothing in particular. But when we're ready to do that, the resources are here in the Orthodox Church to do that.
Okay. Which is to grow.
Which is to grow, to get serious about prayer. There are guides to the life of prayer. You have an easier time finding, frankly, in English especially, you have an easier time finding Orthodox literature about prayer and the life of prayer than you do about theology.
Okay.
To be totally honest.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I think that was a hard thing to try to figure out. But I actually got some of those prayer books and stuff on my stuff.
Yeah. You go to a Protestant church and they're like, well, here's our catechism, or here's this, or here's that. Here's our doctrinal standard, right? Here's our doctrinal statement.
Yeah.
You get here, okay, here's all the theological stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Then you say, well, how do you pray? And they're like, well, you pray.
You realize that.
Whereas ours is like the flip, right? Ours is like, well, where's your theology? Well, start praying.
It's more, it's more of, and that's what I would say, is more of like you have to experience the theology, or the theology is useless. Like that. You have to experience this.
Because God's a person. We're getting to know a person.
It's not, you're not getting to know
information.
Information.
Yeah.
You know a person. Okay.
Yeah.
I find that to be, I think that authenticity is kind of what draws people like me from the hood. Cause that's what drew, regardless of whether the different cultural things that, but it's just like, this is real to me. Like, this is something that's authentic. It's not fake. And it's not faking it, it's not, it's not being concerned about what the world has to think about you.
Yeah.
And trying to change. It's just being like, this is who we are. This is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. This is who we are. This is what we stand for, and this is how we do things. And you can enjoy that. You can like it. You can dislike it. We're not going to change who we are to make other people feel good or comfortable with where they at. So,
right.
And there's something about that's just so real, so authentic, that just off the bat, for a secret, that's saying like, okay, like they're serious about what they're doing. And I can remember, I'm gonna ask my last question after this. I can remember reading some early Christian writer. Maybe it was Justin Martyr, might have been Justin Martyr, one of the early guys, and he was basically saying, and somebody was critiquing somebody. It was like he was critiquing other Christians because leaders or whatever. Maybe it was Justin Martyr, I don't remember. Because he said you cannot expect for your students to do the thing. Like you just basically, it was like you told them that they shouldn't lust after women. You told them that they should live a life of humility. They shouldn't chase money. They should guard themselves. Have one wife.
Yeah.
You just told them to do virtuous things that for some people's ears sound impossible. So when you represent it, you have to be able to, they have to see it done. They have to see that it's possible so that they know that they can do it. Because if they don't see it as possible, you just talking about it, then they don't really know that it's possible and that they can do it. They're going to be like, oh, there he go again, but he can't really do it. There he go with these lofty thoughts, but he's not really engaged in doing it. And I think, and that's another thing that, I feel like, and this is just a feeling that I have, but also, something I like from just looking at, listening to the saints at the monastery and listening to their perspective on different things and like their life. It's more of, man, like this is what we do. It's not just you. I know you've read about it, but this is what we actually do, what we can accomplish. So humans really can accomplish it. You can. You purify. You get closer to God.
When you're ready and you're willing. Yeah.
You're ready and you're willing. Like that's and for me it was that battle. Do you really want God? Because when the God that maybe I was comfortable with was maybe not the God that actually was and is. Do you really want God? Do you really want to serve Him? Are you really ready to detach from all of those things that you thought wasn't sinful, or maybe it's sinful, and you kind of love Him? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that was your human nature. That's your human vibe. Although it's it's weakened. So you was vibing with the weak stuff. You never had the strength. You never had the solid food. You never had that. So you was going along with that. And like, do you really want God? Is He just trying to take all the fun away? You know what I'm saying? But after you switch your mind, you switch your spiritual eyes, so to speak. You begin to realize like there's something peaceful and there's something calming and something joyous about I guess you could call it cleansing yourself. And I found that in that connection with Orthodoxy. I felt, because that's what I think was bothering me the most about where I was in my life is like, hey, I need to be cleansed. I need to be healed. And it's not like, stop just like a get fit thing or health thing, like physical body thing. Like, let's do this, let's do these push-ups, and let's get this food. It's like, no, I need something deeper, some spiritual healing, because I did believe in spiritual. I still believe in like a higher world at the time. So I'm like, and being right on the corner from here and coming in here was really powerful. So and that's what I appreciate about God and Christ, like setting the church up, which I never would have said like 2, 3, 4 years ago. So the fact that I've changed so much just lets me know that is that whatever I experienced here did definitely change me in some ways. Even though it was a resist, the other ways is a resistance, but it's a change.
Yeah. Well, that's one way to discern things is the fruit.
Yeah.
Right. If it's bringing forth good fruit, then there's something good about it.
Yeah.
And if it's not, or if it's bringing forth bad fruit, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
Regardless of how we want to rationalize things in our head.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the core, it's better. Would you rather have things or be happy whether or not you have things? Right?
Be happy whether or not I have things.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you can't have things, right?
Yeah.
But I'd rather be where St. Paul says he was, right? Where he says, whatever my condition,
You have a lot of little.
What I've had, I'm content.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happy at where I need to be.
Yeah. And that was real special for Orthodoxy. Okay, my last question. Hopefully. No.
True. Doesn't have to be the last one ever.
This is the last one for today.
Yeah.
All right, so I grew up with Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
Crazy different world from this world. Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, we was wrapped up in like the Sabbath command, eschatology, and all that. Like that's what it was in the Old Testament. So I wanted to ask, like, what is Orthodoxy's view of the Sabbath, or Sabbaths, and their relationship to Christ and Orthodox Church, and then and this the Torah and the Old Testament in general too, but like food laws. Like I didn't eat pork. I'm just gonna tell you, we didn't eat pork. We chose that one out of all the other ones. We don't eat pork. We don't eat pork because Jesus didn't eat pork.
Yeah.
We kept the Sabbath because Jesus kept Sabbath. We thought we was doing something authentic, and I felt like that was a veil that actually fell off my eyes, a scale. I literally felt that's really what it felt like when I was in college, and I was like, wait, this is not what early Christians thought about this kind of stuff, and like I was like, wow, bro, like, what's going on? Red pill Christianity type stuff. Because for us, all of this was paganism. All of this was all of this was
way back. There was the
evil.
whole going to church on Sundays, the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
As
As a matter of
like
fact,
full on.
as a matter of fact, it's still taught. It's still taught. It's still a thing. That's what I was taught. You know, they used to be a skit. They had a Sunday. We went to this conference. We had a skit. This church was a Sunday. They went to church on Sundays, right? These people went to church on Sunday. But we was in their church, right?
Yeah.
And there was a skit where it showed that it was basically about how the Sabbath keepers, the true children of God, the Sabbath keepers were, being killed by the Sunday worshipers and killed by the other people or the governments and stuff because they went to church on Saturday in a Sunday church that they would be there. And I was like, wow. And I remember my grandmother saying, like, I can't believe they're letting us do this. And I was like, I can't believe it either. So it was kind of like, and the segue to let you answer, Jesus said, like that he gives rest. Come to me, all you who are heavy laden and like burdensome, and I will give you the rest for your souls. And for me, rest was about this one day. Don't do nothing. Don't work. This, that, because God wants it, and you're saved. Like in this, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What's that connection?
When I was a kid, one of my best friends, who also happened to be African American, was a Seventh Day Adventist.
Must be
my friend Greg Washington. It was funny because when we were like middle school age, we were both really into, at the time, WWF.
Yeah.
Right? But he wasn't allowed to do stuff on Saturday.
Yeah, that's exactly how.
And I wasn't supposed to do stuff on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, his parents would videotape, like, the wrestling pay-per-views on the weekend.
Okay.
And then I'd come over and we'd watch them on, like, Monday.
Okay. Both of y'all couldn't
do that. Clear.
Yeah. Both of y'all couldn't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So from knowing him, and they followed the
food things.
Yeah. This is another place where Orthodox Christianity is a little different in their view than a lot of Western churches, because for us, we understand that the Torah is still good and still applies. Like, we don't have this, like, the law is bad and the gospel's good thing that you get in a lot of Protestant churches.
Okay.
Right? So, Christ said over and over again, right, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. And then a lot of people interpret that as like, well, yeah, he fulfills it, so he gets rid of it. And it's like, well, then what's the difference between abolish and fulfill? They both mean get rid of, right? Yeah. So what we understand that fulfill to mean is that we still follow the Torah, but Christ is like a lens, right, through which it's interpreted, right? So, like, we still call it Pascha, right, when Christ rose from the dead. That's the Greek word for Passover, right? So we're still celebrating Passover. But when we celebrate Passover, we're not celebrating Israel coming out of Egypt, right? Because that was an image, right? That was a foreshadowing of what Christ did in his resurrection, leading an exodus from death to life, right? And so that's what we celebrate. So we celebrate the fulfillment of it, right? But we still celebrate it. We don't set aside, okay, now we're not going to celebrate Passover anymore, right? So for us, like, the early church didn't start from scratch, right? Like, okay, that old religion, we're start new and do our own thing, right? We bring those things over, but we don't celebrate them the old way. We celebrate how they were fulfilled in Christ. And that extends to, like, the Sabbath, right? What it said in the Synaxarion, which is part of the Matin service, at one of the services at Pascha, it says that the apostles, because of Christ's resurrection, transferred the dignity of the Sabbath to the first day of the week. Yeah. And the reason for that was the way they understood, right? In St. John's Gospel, Christ, when he dies on the cross, his last words are, "It is finished," is how it's translated in English, right? It's tetelestai in Greek. That Greek verb is the same verb that's used in Genesis 2, 1 and 2. When it says God completed his work, creating the world, right? He finished his work. It's the same verb. right? So earlier in St. John's Gospel, one of the times when the Pharisees are always coming after Jesus and his disciples about not keeping the Sabbath, right? Over and over and over again. Yeah. And so at one point in St. John's Gospel, they come to him because they've been picking wheat while they're walking through the field, and they're like, "Oh, you're harvesting crops," right? and Christ says to them, "Do you think my Father's working even up to this very day, right? And I am working." Yeah. Right? Yeah. So when he says it's finished, right, on the cross, that's referencing back to the end of the creation, Genesis, when God finished his work. Okay. And then he rested on the seventh day. So Christ rests on the seventh day in the tomb. Okay. Right? He dies on Friday, rests in the tomb, rises again on the first day. Mm-hmm. Right? And so we celebrate the resurrection on Sunday because we're celebrating that fulfillment of the Sabbath. Okay. Right? So it's still the Sabbath. It's the dignity and the celebration, all those things from the Sabbath. But we're now celebrating not like the foreshadowing that was pointing to what Christ was going to do, but we're celebrating what Christ did and accomplished.
So is the law attached to it? Like the law of this, on the Sabbath day, I'm not going to quote it even though I could, the Sabbath day, you're not supposed to work in the man serving, maid serving, and you're supposed to. Well, I guess it transformed over time, which a lot of people don't. But
traditionally, like in Orthodox countries, Sundays and feast days, everybody had off. Yeah. So to this day, if you go to Greece, like on Ascension, which is a Thursday, everybody's off work. Yeah. To celebrate Christ's Ascension. Yeah. Right. So that was the traditional thing. Yeah. Now we're living in a country,
like me,
a capitalist country that isn't Orthodox Christian, right? Yeah. And stuff. So unless you work at Chick-fil-A, right, you don't get Sunday off, right? Necessarily, and people need to work in. So we're not like legalistic about it.
That's what. That's like people. Right. Like for my tradition, it's an eternal. Moral law. Yeah. You can't. Yeah. It's an eternal moral law. You can't, do. But I want to go.
That's not how we look at morality, though. Remember, it's not this list of rules.
It's more of a relationship thing. So, if I, if I can still maintain my relationship, even though I can't always get off on a Saturday or a Sunday, if I'm maintaining my relationship, I'm still good. Man, that's good. That's good. And I never looked at it like that either.
That's what Christ was always saying to the Pharisees about the Sabbath. Is it better to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil? Yeah. Better do good. Right? So if I'm doing good, why are you coming?
Yeah. So with the fulfilled thing is, I got this from Irenaeus. He talked about pleroo.
Yeah. The fullness. Yeah.
And he basically was explaining how it provides greater scope. It goes deeper. It augments, if you could, what the bare letter was saying. You go deeper than that when that's what Christ was getting to. The deepness, the heart of the matter. And now that you explained it that way, it's about the relationship with God.
Yeah. We tend to look at prophecy and fulfillment like, okay, prophecy means somebody predicted something was going to happen, and then it got fulfilled means it happened. Yeah. But that's not even the origin of the English word. Okay. The origin of the English word and the Greek word is based on is filled full.
To fill up to the full.
Yeah, fill it up till it's overflowing. Okay. Right? Okay. So if the old covenant, you have this cup, right? Now that cup's filled up and sort of bursting out of the, bursting out of the seams, right? Okay. And that's the imagery Christ uses about you don't put new wine in old wineskins. Okay. Because it's going to burst them.
Okay. So you have to put new wine in a new wineskin. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because like we mean not eating pork, and not eating certain things, food.
And so it gets reshaped.
Understanding, like food is not. Jesus basically said. The food goes in the body, comes out. Yeah. And that it was it a cultural lesson and you separate people. When you sit down to eat, you sit down with people that's eating what you eating. Yeah. So like they can't eat all this stuff, so it kind of separating them in their culture, and I guess I see some people say represented like different moral, they don't be like the split hook versus other stuff, to certain type of people and stuff. So,
and when you read the prophets, it talks about why that was.
Okay.
It talks about how God taught them to discern between what was clean and what was unclean.
Yeah.
Because what was important was not about knowing which animals to raise on your farm.
Yeah.
Right? What was important was distinguishing between what's clean and what's unclean.
Yeah.
Right? And in the New Testament, they could still say, right, don't touch any unclean thing.
They could well know about.
Right? But yeah, it's not a bad. That's what Christ was trying to say with it's not what goes in, it's what comes out.
It's not about health. I think a lot of people look at it as for me, it was like a health thing. Like, but I was reading Arbanel. Arbanel is like a rabbi.
Okay.
He was talking to I don't know if it was a keyboard Maimonides. That's two.
Yeah.
That's way further, but I can't remember which one. But like basically, I think it was Maimonides. But he was basically saying, because he disagreed with Maimonides, he said the Torah is not a health book. He was saying, look, I can look at all these nations around me, and they're eating the things the Torah say don't eat. Look how long they're living. He's like, that's basically what he said. He said it's about something spiritual. It's about something spiritual, something deeper than your health. I'm pretty sure there's some health benefits to some of the things, and I'm a vegetarian.
Yeah.
But still, it's more of like that spiritual. Yeah. That spiritual connection.
Yeah. It wasn't, it's not about, hey man, how dare you wear a cotton polyester blend?
Yeah.
Right. Well, sure.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Thank
you. But it's
yes.
about, man, you can't take something that's good and pure and holy and mix it together with something that's not, and have it stay pure and holy.
God's practical. He used everything he could.
Yeah.
Even to what they wore.
You need to learn how to think about these things and make these distinctions. Yeah. And discern these things.
Okay. And I think, I think that's what Orthodoxy is. It's a way of life. It's a way of distinguishing, so that you can know the good and do it, and be united and be back to that image, that likeness of God that you see in Genesis. And that's what I want. That's why I'm here. That's why I came. I mean, and I know it's like sacrifice and stuff, but. I think sacrifice is like being in the womb, like it's forming you for your birth, for your what you really supposed to be, and suffering and all of that. What you really supposed to be is like suffering and pain. I kind of learned this in my own life. Like it's forming you. You might not see it yet. You might be like, man, it's stuck. It sucked, but it's forming you into something that you have no idea how great it's gonna be. Like caterpillar to the butterfly, like kind of thing. Yeah. And I kind of feel like that's where I'm at. So I do appreciate you for doing this with me. If you have some final words, anything you want to say to me, anything like that.
Well, no, I'm available to do this anytime. I
love this.
Right. This doesn't have to be like, the only time we do. Yeah. I hope it's not the only time we do this, right?
Okay.
But I'm always available to talk about this stuff, answer any questions you have. This is basically what I do, like in the class for new members.
Okay.
Is I say, you've been coming here. What are your questions about this? Yeah. What are your questions about that? And just talking and having conversations and kind of putting it together. Because again, it's not about like, oh, you need to have these doctrines in your head.
I figured it out. I figured it out a long time ago. It wasn't about that.
You need to memorize these dates. These ecumenical councils.
Out there, so that was wonderful. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yes. And like I told you, as far as I'm concerned, you've been coming here a long time. You're already part of us. You're already part of our community.